All right, well, welcome back to the Salt and Light podcast, everybody. We're so glad you're tuning in with us. We got Jake, Kurt, and myself. I'm back. It's been a little bit. I think I haven't been here for the last two. So honestly, I'm like actually a little nervous. I feel a little rusty.
I want to say hats off to Isaac for filling in a big way. Yeah, almost we're questioning. I don't know. Do we need Graham back? Or yeah.
Well, that's good. That puts a fire under me, and I can't take this seat for granted.
That's right.
We're all replaceable.
But thanks for filling in for me, Isaac.
Hey, you know what? I've been thinking about dreams lately.
Oh, have you?
And I heard you guys talking about it when I came in. Tell me a little bit about what you're saying.
The context behind what we were talking about was you were saying in the jail that people tried to sleep more because to pass the time.
Yeah.
And I asked Jake if we were thrown into prison because of our faith, would you change your mind about lucid dreaming? Because we had a really interesting conversation about lucid dreaming
I don't know.
a few weeks ago.
What it is. Yeah.
So, Jake, do you want to explain what it is?
So lucid dreaming is and I've not done a deep dive. I know very, very little. I just had this awareness as somebody who's on a podcast about to talk about a subject that I have almost no knowledge of, other than.
But that's what we talk about here. Things that we really don't know anything about.
You can count on the Salt and Light podcast. Believe everything we say.
Professional yappers right here.
I felt so convicted to give that preamble about that.
Good disclaimer.
Good disclaimer. Yep. So anyway, lucid dreaming is basically the ability to control your dream. So you can move yourself around, make things happen, do what you want to do in your own dream.
Yeah.
Which some people experience here and there without rhyme or reason. But there's been a big push, very culturally probably, but it's probably like in Eastern religions and things. It's probably a Hindu practice is my guess. If I had to guess its origins or something like that.
Can I have an example of that?
So you fall asleep and lucid dreaming would be like, I can fly to New York,
in your dream.
In your dream, I can.
Basically, the dream's not just happening to you, but now you're realizing that you're dreaming. And once you realize you're dreaming, then you could do things in your dream.
So you're like an avatar on The Office, where Dwight was flying around with Jim, something like that, with a guitar.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that episode.
Oh, yeah. But I'm still not clear. Do you prep yourself before you sleep?
Essentially. So people, maybe we don't want to dive too much into it because there's also some...
We don't think it's a good practice.
It's a very bad practice.
It's very suspect, I'd say that.
I'm a full on believer that it's
demonize things though.
He says it's bad.
So I
say it's a gray area, but probably don't do it. Just don't even dabble with it. I haven't
Graham
done
likes
myself.
to play the line. He says that I demonize
well, I don't
things.
like to. I don't
Graham
like
likes to dance with the devil.
I'm not quick to be like, oh yeah, rock and roll's from Satan, you know.
Sure, yeah, I get that.
But
so there's a lot of
next topic. Yeah.
There's a lot of ties to sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
With lucid dreaming, people wake up from lucid dreaming with sleep paralysis.
Huh.
And then the conversation came up because I was telling Graham, one of the YouTubers that I'll watch, like a fitness life YouTube or whatever, he had what he wanted to do was he was trying to life hack. So he thought, if I can lucid dream, then I can practice skills and do things and learn at an accelerated rate.
Kind of like the Matrix.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good example of it.
Downloads.
And so he started meditating during the day, but then he would go and he started to do a couple different activities or practices in his sleep routine to try to get himself to lucid dream. And he did it. So he started, at first he said it was 20 seconds. He would be able to control himself in his dream for 20 seconds and then he'd wake up.
How could he possibly know the amount of time that he was doing that in his
sleep?
He
said what he felt like.
Okay.
In his dream, he felt like he could control himself for about 20 seconds and then he'd wake up. And he said, but then he could do it longer and longer until he was able to do it. But then he started waking up with sleep paralysis. And he'd wake up, couldn't move, was aware of everything. But then, so this is not a Christian. This is just a regular guy who's not even spiritual. And I'd say he's probably an atheist or agnostic maybe. Mm-hmm. And he said, so he started doing that. And then he got really freaked out by the sleep paralysis, but he kept going. He said, and then he woke up. And he said there was this foul smell in his room.
Oh, no.
And he saw a dark figure in the corner of his room and this growling.
Yeah.
And he's like, I have no idea what that was, but it really freaked me out.
Yeah.
And then, so he stopped trying to lucid dream, but then he couldn't stop getting sleep paralysis. And it went on for months. And so says me, I think it's all an open
Sounds
door.
Bad to me, Graham.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No, Graham, you tell us why you think it'd be fine.
No, well,
to dabble.
One story is one story, but this is my experience. I don't recommend it. First of all, I'm not trying to say it's a good thing. But so I listened to an interesting podcast on it when I was in college, and I thought, oh, this sounds like a life hack. I could like study for my exams like in my sleep or something. That seems like such a great deal, and fly and do whatever else I want to do, that a teenage boy would want to do. So anyways, I was talking to my friends in my hall in my dorm about it, and one of my friends just got like super serious. He was like, don't do that. Do not try that. He said, I was trying to lucid dream for a while, and I was able to do it. And it was similar to the story that you mentioned, Jake. And he said, and I woke up, and he's like, I've never had this happen before. I was in the middle of a sleep paralysis, and this cloaked figure walked into my room, opened the door, walked into my room with a knife, and like got right up really close to me. And as it was about to stab the knife into my chest, he's like, my sleep paralysis broke, and I was able to like jolt out of my bed. He was like,
again, Graham, sounds like a good idea.
So very well could be a demonic doorway. But
as I think about it,
I have asked
those
Jesus.
are two experiences.
Those are two, yeah.
I've asked Jesus to let me dream about him.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened though. But so I'll allow his power to make that happen.
I feel like God gives us prophetic dreams, though.
Yeah. No,
I've experienced
well, obviously,
that.
Right? You see it through the Bible
all throughout.
Well, here's a question: do you think God would do that purely for our enjoyment, or was there always a purpose behind a vision or a dream?
So, I think the enjoyment I get from God is just being present with Him. Mm-hmm. So, in a dream, if He's there, it doesn't concern me what the content is.
Yep.
As long as He's the content.
Yeah. I was more like trying to be like
I get what you're
inquisitive about what would be the motivator.
Yeah.
That God would God just do it just for entertainment's sake?
Well,
but I guess that's a bad question.
Well, so it'd be akin to if a third of my life is sleeping.
Right.
And I'm supposed to pray unceasingly with no unnecessary intervals,
right.
Where I feel His presence. If I could bring that into that other 8 hours, that'd be awesome.
I've never heard anyone talk about that other than Micah
Turnbow,
which
Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah.
Flying his dragons in heaven.
Before I ever heard of Micah Turnbow.
yeah. But I've not heard Christians talk about like you'd think of Brother Lawrence or Madame Guyon would talk about that maybe.
Yeah, no, I've never heard anybody talk
about that.
I think you can really prime yourself.
For I could have a ministry.
We could make a lot of money. You teach people how to do that.
It hasn't worked for me yet, though.
Sleep, I think, can be somewhat of a spiritual practice, not in like a active way, but the way that you end your evening, I find oftentimes affects the way I sleep and the dreams I have and stuff like that. And so if I'm like listening to worship music or William Augusto and praying and kind of like settling down before I go to bed, one, I usually find I fall asleep quicker. And then two, I might not dream at all and feel just like rested and restored when I wake up. Or I have like decent or good dreams, just not bad dreams. But it is really interesting that when you do have a bad night's sleep, especially if you have like nightmares and stuff, how that can just like taint your whole day. Because a few nights ago, Magdalene was like tossing and turning in bed, and she was like whimpering and making like sounds, and I like woke her up, and she was having bad dreams. And then she like explained them to me the next morning. They were kind of like violent dreams of people attacking our family and stuff like that. And she said it just kind of like lingered with her all throughout the day, And you could see how the enemy could use that as a way to try to attack your mind.
Breaks your connection.
Yeah.
Because we want to.
It's another form of distraction.
A mental connection that we have with Jesus, and we don't want things to get in the way of that.
And I don't necessarily think we should like overreact or overanalyze every dream we have too, sure. Because sometimes I think you just have weird dreams. It's not always necessarily attack from Satan, but I think it's one of those areas that Christians don't. There's not a whole lot of like Christian literature about sleep and dreams and. Yeah, but it's in the Bible, like you mentioned, Kurt. It's all throughout the Bible of God speaking to people through dreams and different things like that.
There are books about how to dream prophetically, which I don't feel the need to crack.
Yeah,
because that
I could see getting into like weird,
God wants to do it,
like
then
extra
I'll let him
biblical territory.
Yeah, and you have methods and things like that I'm.
Well, I like your. I like the way you broached it with God. Like, I'd like to spend more time with you.
Yeah.
If you like give that to me. I think that's very different than like I want to have prophetic dreams, so I want to figure out how to.
Yeah.
It feels very manipulative of God to say like I want to use your. It's like anything else, but I want to use that for my purposes versus like more intimacy. Is a very different heart.
Can you imagine waking up after spending like 8 hours with Jesus? I mean, I just wow. You just you change up,
ready to tackle the day.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a great way that God can speak to us if we're open to it, because God can use pretty much anything to speak to us.
So that's interesting as we're open to it, because so the whole consciousness of sleep, and I feel like I'm totally out of control when I'm asleep. That's why this lucid thing is interesting.
Right.
It almost seems, I don't believe you can control it, but what you are doing is giving control to the demonic.
Right.
You're saying, I can now give you permission to mess with me. And it would make sense that they would start off in a way that you felt it was bearing fruit.
Right.
Oh, look, I had this 20 seconds that it worked, and then you end up with sleep paralysis, dudes with knives and growling people in the corner.
Yeah.
That's the typical.
And I think we were talking about that too. I was like, why do you think this would be necessarily something that the demonic could use to have a access point into our life? Like, why would it be an open doorway? And we were saying, do you think is it because it's a control thing that we're almost trying to be like God in our dreams? We're trying to create our own reality. Or is it what we're doing in our dreams, trying to be God in our dreams, that we're trying to do sinful behaviors that we wouldn't do normally in normal awake life, that is opening the doors? But it seems like something is creating that open doorway for the enemy to go, oh, you're letting me in here when you're messing with this stuff.
So there's a desire we have, probably a wrong desire, because Jesus should be enough for us, and we're saying, we're not even asking him for this, right? We're asking for some insight while we're dreaming, and there's not a place where we're more vulnerable than when we're asleep. So when we're awake, we get to take every thought captive, make it obedient to him. We can't do that when we're sleeping. Right. So it's like he's playing Candyland in our heads when we let him in there like that. I've determined that it's a bad thing.
But I definitely do have those moments, like I'm sure you guys have had this too, where your dream's just getting so whack, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is a dream. Like in your dream, and you realize it, and you're like, I'm not doing that. Like you're studying for like a test, and all of a sudden in your mind, you're back in school, and you're like, the test is tomorrow. Or sometimes I have dreams where it's like, I'm about to be speaking, like giving a message in like less than an hour. And they're like, are you ready for your message? And I have no idea what I'm going to say. And sometimes I just go out on stage and I'm just like ad-libbing. And sometimes in my dream, like people like are walking out. They're like, this stinks, you know?
It's like your last Sunday message.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, take it back, Kurt. Oh, take it back.
Wow.
You rascal. But then I have these moments usually where I'm like, wait, this is silly. This is a dream.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's bad to recognize that you're dreaming.
No, I think that's not pursuing control necessarily. Right. I think I've shared, because we've talked about sleep before on the podcast. I think I've shared like there are times, because I've had like repeating dreams, which I find the worst.
Right.
Because they're not good ones either. And anytime, I've always felt out of control. Like I've never ever experienced any feeling of control in a dream, even if I'm aware that it's a dream. Like I've had the recognition or the awareness before that it's I'm in the same repeatable dream.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh no, because I'm like, I know this dream.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I can do. And that is like that's not a fun night for sure. But I feel like I always dream. There's very few. I could count like maybe on both hands, like the number of nights that I think I would go to sleep and just wake up. That almost never happens. But
while we're on the topic of dreams, can we just say Inception is one of the better movies made in the last 20 years?
I've only
can
watched
we
it
agree
once.
with that?
I'm almost
can we
thinking
get
of
there,
watching it.
please?
Can there be a consensus?
I think I wouldn't say I wouldn't put it up on the top movie, but the fascination of how they put it together.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine writing that.
Yeah. I feel like Nolan is really good at taking really trippy ideas and then like making it understandable for a general audience, where while you're watching it you feel really sophisticated, where you're like, yeah, of course. And when you're dreaming, like time goes slower in your dream, and in order to wake up you have to fall backwards and fall into water. And
yeah, it was very clever.
You do have to think a lot during that movie. I just remember, okay, the top is still spinning, so it's,
there's a lot of people who nerd out with that movie. Speaking of movies, Magdalene and I watched The Truman Show. It was her first time.
Oh wow, I've seen it many times.
That's a good one.
I think it's such a demonstration of the kingdom versus the world.
Yeah,
kind of Matrix-esque. There's a few that type of thing. What was her highlight of it then?
Well, she felt like almost claustrophobic watching it. She was like, I can't.
Should you explain what the Truman Show
Oh
is?
yeah. Well, if you've never seen The Truman Show, well, spoiler alert, first of all. But it's basically about, the premise is Jim Carrey is the main character. He's Truman. And basically this production company adopted him at birth and created this giant bubble. And they created a television show around him. And he's the only person who's unaware that he's in this TV show. And everybody else in his life is an actor. All of his best friends, his parents, his wife that he gets married to is an actor. And so he's living in this little seaside town that's like this perfect quintessential town, kind of going through the same routine almost every single day. And then he's like slowly starts to wake up to the idea that, wait, something's off here. I think this reality might not be actual reality. And so it's a good movie that kind of like broaches on the idea of breaking out of the status quo. And then also kind of like overcoming your fears as well, because one of the big things that they do to keep him on this island is he's terrified of the water, because at a young age he went on this sailing trip with his father. This big storm comes and his father falls off the boat, and he thinks his father dies in the storm.
Could I add that there's no nudity, profanity, or violence in it either?
Great movie. Yeah. Back when you could just make a normal movie without any of that stuff, you know? But no, it's like super family friendly. I remember the first time I watched it was actually in youth group here in the church. I think Jared Cowger was like, he wanted it an off night. It's like, I ran out of things to give messages on. Let's watch The Truman Show. But I thought one of the cool things in that is he has to, basically how he gets out of the bubble is he sails across the sea and he kind of crashes into the edge of the bubble. So it's like he has to overcome his fear in order to do that. And so Magdalene and I kind of had some good conversations about like, what if you were living, if your life is Truman and you're living in your own unique bubble, like what would be the fear that's keeping you from breaking out of that bubble, like getting out of your status quo, and taking that leap to the unknown, so to speak.
Wasn't it interesting as he was coming to that discovery, how many people, so they're the job of all the actors and the producer, director, were to keep him in.
Yeah.
And that can happen in the church as well.
Right.
As you're looking for more of Jesus, more discovery, but it seems to go outside of the traditions of the place you are. People try to reel you back in, and you have to go through fear to people and ideas that they're putting in your head
Right.
until you find this freedom in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good movie.
There's so
Yeah.
many good
Yeah.
layers and metaphors
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. The similarities to the Matrix are really uncanny there. And aren't both of those movies based on like the allegory of the cave?
Plato.
Yeah, Plato's the
allegory of
cave.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yep.
It's the same. It's
Are
like
you familiar with that, Kurt?
Oh, that remind me of the cave. I probably but
Basically, Plato, the philosopher from Greece, he had this allegory that he was famous for of these prisoners inside of a cave who are chained against a wall, and they look up at the wall, and there's shadows on the wall that are entertaining them, and it's like just entertaining enough that they don't recognize that they're prisoners chained to a wall till one of the prisoners has this realization that he's like, oh, I got chains on, and he like somehow gets out of them, and he peers around the wall and he sees that there's a fire and that there's people behind the wall holding like puppets and marionettes that are casting the shadows onto the wall. That's kind of keeping everyone chained and entertained. And so he kind of sees that, and then he finds his way out of this cave, and he gets out to the surface where he sees the sun for the first time, and he sees, oh, those shadows on the wall, those weren't really trees. This is what trees were supposed to look like, or this is what birds were really supposed to look like. But it also talks about as he's coming out of the cave, it's kind of like this uncomfortable experience of him being exposed to the sunlight for the first time, where it's like his eyes hurt, his like skin is like, oh, what's this, like this sun? It's like burning my skin almost. And it's this uncomfortable process. And then he goes in that allegory, he actually goes back into the cave, and he wants to tell the prisoners that they're enslaved, basically. And the prisoners kill the messenger in the
And they
allegory.
prefer to stay where
They're like, no, this
they
is
prefer to keep
this is reality.
the
Yeah.
life that they have.
Because it's such an existential breakdown to their reality that they end up killing
Yeah,
him.
they don't-
Yeah.
Wow. And that was Platonic Corner
Yeah.
for on the Salt and Light podcast, which we plan on doing every year.
What an
Every year.
interesting kind of like foreshadowing to
Yeah.
Christ too.
Yeah.
That like Plato never even, I don't even think he was exposed to like Judaism at all, is getting this general revelation from God, basically talking about what Christ is going to fulfill hundreds of years later.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to think about.
Isn't this always Platonic Corner anyway?
There's a lot of oozing wisdom happening here.
What do you think about that, Kurt?
It's all over my shoes.
What are the shadows that keep us enslaved,
Well,
cast on the wall?
that's the freedom that we find in the Spirit. We start thinking differently. We'll go back to the church allegory. It's not even an allegory, but
Allegory of the church.
how our traditions, how our way, all the things that we do on a regular basis, that in the Holy Spirit we should be able to assess all of those and say, oh, are these good? Are they glorifying? Are they enhancing life, the life that we're supposed to have in Jesus? And I think we as people we think it's bad to question those things. And so consequently we kind of chain ourselves in that, and we don't experience everything he has for us. Because the idea that when we get to a certain place and we think, oh, this is a good place, and we found satisfaction in that, we're essentially shackling ourselves at that time, and we're not allowing him to speak into us anymore. The whole piece in Matthew 13, the parable of the soils there, that if you have, you'll get more, or if you listen to my words, I'll even give you more. But if you don't listen, even what you have, I'm going to take away. And I think that's a perpetual glory to glory piece that God has for us, that we should expect more.
Yeah, we were talking in men's group this morning. We were going through Acts 5, and we got on the topic of like persecution and the boldness that they had, to go into the temple and then be flogged and then leave and immediately go back to sharing about Jesus. And I said that there's I said there's almost like this lie that we believe when it comes to persecution, that we view persecution as a Christian. We view it happening to us, but we do it in our current state of mind and experience. Yeah. And so I think the reason why it feels so overwhelming, the idea of being persecuted for Christ, is that we think of, oh, if I were to be persecuted right in this instant, I don't feel ready for that. And so it feels just overwhelming, versus what you see in Scripture and oftentimes in the world as well, is that there's this trajectory where you're seeing and experiencing God's power, his presence, his experience on this just ever growing, sometimes very rapid trajectory, where it removes so much of our flesh and our doubt that by the time persecution rolls around, like it was almost insignificant to them, because they'd seen and experienced so much of the Holy Spirit. Like when Peter's walking around in his shadows healing people, his intimacy with the Holy Spirit at that moment is like akin to Jesus. And so though death is difficult, he's like, my life is meaningless comparatively. And I think we don't view, we look at it almost like, to go back to like the cave analogy or the Truman Show, we view it almost like, well, I don't want to go outside and experience life because I know there are bears out there and a bear could kill me. And it's like, we would laugh at that. Isaac did laugh at that. Thanks, Isaac. Because it seems so absurd, right? Like, well, why would the off chance, sure, that could happen. The percentages are insane, but like, yes, it could happen, but that would be such a foolish reason to not experience life just because of the fear of that.
Yeah.
And yet we do that with persecution. We're like, well, but what if I'm persecuted? Right. And yet we keep ourselves from experiencing any of the life. And it's like, well, if you experience life to that extent, it doesn't really, it's so inconsequential comparatively to what you've experienced that you're almost prepared.
I actually think that this is my take. Most Christians are nervous of sharing their faith, not because they're scared of persecution, but because they're scared of actually being held like accountable to their faith.
Sure,
in the sense of like, you tell your coworkers that you're a Christian, and now people are looking at you and they're like, oh, Jake's a Christian. Like he goes to church, he follows Jesus. He's at like, does like men's Bible study. And like now they're looking at you as like Jesus's ambassador. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are scared of being that person because they're like, oh, now I actually have to like check what I say at work, and I can't be a jerk to other people, and I have to check my temper and different things like that, you know? And I think if I could guess, people say, oh, I'm scared of persecution, but the hidden fear behind that is, oh, people are actually going to hold me accountable to what I actually believe in.
I would almost question, I would take a little bit of a turn on that and say, do you even have faith? Because I think the guys in Acts 5 are so filled with the Spirit of Jesus that they're speaking it out as just an overflow of who they are. They're not making a conscious decision, should I witness or not? It's just... And so this kind of, so we keep talking about this kind of a similar theme, stepping out of something into something else, right? And so I was thinking about doing this. That kind of came to me this morning. I thought about it before, so let's get your take on that. So I'm going to go to jail right after this, and I thought I'd talk to the lads about the parable in Luke 18 about the widow and the unjust judge. And so I have a take on it, and I want you to refute me if you're able there, where Jesus told a parable so people would pray and never give up, essentially. So that's how he begins the whole thing. There was a widow, and she went to a judge so she could have a justice against her adversary. Yep. And so she keeps going to him. The judge keeps ignoring her, and the judge doesn't care about people nor fear God. Right. But she kept after him, and because she kept after him, he even says, I don't care about God and I don't care about people, but because she keeps bugging me, I'm going to give her justice against her adversary. And so that's kind of the setup. And then it says, how much more will God give us justice to those who come to him day and night, who cry out to him day and night.
Because she was coming in the middle of the night and banging on his door.
Right.
And so Jesus is saying, you come to God and cry out to him day and night, and how much more will he give justice to you?
Right.
So keep that in mind. We're approaching him. Justice comes from that. And then Jesus goes ahead and says, when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth?
Yeah.
And so here's what I'm thinking, that we receive justice from God's presence.
Yeah.
So the parable, so in a parable, it's not always, you don't get every aspect of it. So she received justice. Our justice comes from being in God's presence, from crying out for him. When Jesus returns, will he find us enjoying his presence, which is faith? So he applies faith to the woman as she's going to the judge. And so I want to say to the folks, we'll talk about what is justice, because they would all have a different idea of that from their condition that they're in, the place that they are. But true justice comes from the experiencing the presence of God. And when you experience it, you'll find that you don't need anything else. You're not calling for... So you find this on these crime shows all the time. So someone kidnaps and murders your son, and so the police officer thinks it's going to be some sort of salve to the person, and says, "Don't worry, we're going to find out who did this." And I'm thinking, who gives a rip? My son is now taken from me. There's nothing in that's good at all. And so that woman was, whatever was happening with her adversary, what he was doing with her, our justice is just being with him. What else would he do for us, right?
Right.
He'll certainly, Jesus died for us and allowed us to be reconciled to us, but the whole purpose for that is so that we're present with him.
Right.
And so anyhow,
So it's not,
so the justice of God is our presence with him. That's my
response to that parable shouldn't be to go get a cork board and then pin up pictures of things that I want in life and just look at those every single day and pray towards them, like six-pack abs.
Doesn't seem like it. Cry out to him day and night for your...
An F-150 truck.
Yeah. But I don't see, especially like you're talking about in Acts, God didn't promise these guys when they went out again to say, everything's going to be great. I'm going to give you what you want.
No, just the opposite.
It's just, and then you see, was it in 4 or 5 where it says, they recognize one thing about these guys, that they had been with Jesus.
Right.
And so it's the presence before and the presence after that allows us to operate.
Well, I think what can prove that to be the case is similarly when you just read it at staff meeting on Monday, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. He promises freedom, but he wouldn't necessarily, not everybody who follows and prays to Jesus is taken out of worldly captivity.
Right.
There are people who are still enslaved all over the world, and yet he says where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. And so it's the same thing where his presence brings freedom to the things that could keep us in bondage. And I think there's that piece of it that just shows that that's a truth. I would say, I think about like when Jesus returns, will he find faith on the earth? I think faith, yes, is us in his presence, but I'd say that can be more of an active thing, where says what I take out of the parable is that he demonstrates the woman's great faith, that she would continuously come to the judge even though she's being turned down. Her faith was this overcoming desire to have it, so she would keep going. And so like a persistence in prayer, that would Jesus find a people who are constantly pursuing him. Constantly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I also look at it in the sense of, so he gives 2 stories after that, and he's commending her on her persistence, and he's like, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith? And then it's kind of like, well, what kind of prayers does God hear, right? Is part of one of the questions I think, is because we all have been in a position where we've prayed for something and it doesn't happen for one reason or another. And it doesn't mean God doesn't love you. It doesn't even mean what you asked for was bad, but maybe God had a different plan or a different will. But when it comes to the justice of receiving his presence, it does seem like there's heart postures that God honors and doesn't. And the next story he tells after that is the two men praying in the temple, or I think it's in the temple or
tax
the synagogue.
Collector and
the tax collector
Pharisee,
and the Pharisee. And the Pharisee's like, God, I thank you that I tithe and I give a tenth of everything I own. I follow your law. I'm doing really well. And I especially thank you that I'm not like this guy over here, this miserable sinner, you know? And then
so I go home and say to my wife after these podcasts, hey, I'm glad I'm not like those guys.
They go, not like Jake and Kurt, no, or Jake and Graham. And then the tax collector stood at a distance. He wouldn't even look up to heaven, beat his chest and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified, which is interesting. He says justified like justice, before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. So I think he's also giving us a little key. And then the next one after that is people are bringing their children to Jesus to bless them, the babies and stuff. That's why we should do children dedications, I guess. Yeah. Just messing. And then he rebukes the disciples, rebuke the people, and he's like, they're like, this isn't what Jesus is about. And Jesus says, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly, I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it, is what he says after that. And I just thought those are like two little keys he kind of gives after that widow story of there's a persistence, but then there's a heart posture of humility, recognizing who we are in light of who God is, and seeing our need for him, that we can't come to God with this posture of self-sufficiency and self-reliance and go, oh yeah, I got it all together. I'm self-righteous, God, and like I'm doing really well. Because then he gives the real life example after that is the rich young ruler comes after that. And that's the real life example of him saying, I follow all the laws. And Jesus goes, well, you're missing one thing then. Just sell everything you own. Easy task, you know.
I almost find the same attribute in all three of those. So the woman had this persistence, perseverance, obstinance, you could almost say, right? That's what. And then the next one, this tax collector is obstinate. He decides he's going to come in the temple. I bet they weren't too welcome in that place,
right?
And so he's beating his chest and. Hey, I just want this.
Can't even look up.
And then I thought about this, because what we talked about on Monday, of our asking for His glory and not giving up on that. That when I think about that verse about the kingdom belongs to such as these, you think about what's a child's characteristics, their dependency, their humility, their innocence. But the one that comes up the most, especially when your kid turns 1.5 to 3, is their obstinance. And that's one thing that He rewards when we do it in the right light. So it's the same thing that when
the target is right.
Yeah.
And the target has to be intimacy with God. It can't just be looking at His hands and missing His face in the process.
Yeah. There's a really sweet moment I think I remember seeing where like I can never remember, like Prince William, I think. That's the older brother?
The older one, yeah.
Prince William?
Yeah.
Oh, are the princes now who are?
Yeah. So he's like, it's in the middle of this like super intense ceremony. They show like he's all dressed in like the military garb and everything. And there's like, who knows how many people there and all the royal whatever. Yeah. And so all these people, and he's like the center of this ceremony. It's all about him. And so he's like being honored by all these people, and his son comes like running up in the middle of it all, right? Just like because he's a child, he doesn't understand why he's my dad. Why wouldn't I be able to come up to him? And he just runs over and he like starts to climb on his lap, and Prince William just like picks him up and like sets him on his lap, and it's like it was super simple, but it was like, oh, such a sweet thing, that like the relationship was so much more than like.
It's not about the ceremony,
the ceremonial
pomp and
piece,
circumstance, but yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what like when it says that we would come to God like little children. It's we're not aware. We're just like looking at him for who he is to us, not like what we have to do to get there or the formalities of it all. I was like, oh, that's such a great example.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah. What do you think about Meghan Markle?
I'm so glad you got a joke in there because I didn't know what to say after that. I was like, wow, that was a plane lander analogy right there. That was like a sermon ending. Like, that was like an altar call. Come on, guys. Also, what do you guys think about Meghan Markle? Well, pretty controversial, right? Kind of tainting the royal bloodline if you think about it. You know, Americans coming in there. She's American, right? Megan?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that was part of the controversy.
Again, this would be a subject I would be very
You know all about this, right, Jake?
Yeah, I talked to my wife about the chances of me perhaps becoming a royal. And I think I would do pretty well at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be seated in heavenly places, Kurt.
Yeah.
You will. I guess we're even going to judge the angels.
She gets mad when
don't
I
know
do
what that
it.
means.
When you talk about becoming a royal,
Yeah.
does she hold it in high esteem?
No, she just thinks I'm stupid.
You could get like knighted, right? That would be cool.
Like the Beatles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that guy that played
Sir
Professor
Kurt
X.
Holmgren. Yeah.
Who's that guy?
Professor X.
Yeah, from the X-Men, the 2000s one. The
Oh,
bald guy.
Charles. No, that's his.
Oh,
that's
the
his
guy
character's
from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Ian McKellen.
Ian
He's
McKellen.
Sir
Yeah,
Ian
yeah,
McKellen.
he was knighted.
They're giving out knighting to
No, he
everybody
wasn't
though.
in Star Trek. He was
Oh, he wasn't in Star
no,
Trek?
he wasn't the Star Trek guy. He was you're talking about
Patrick
Stewart.
Stewart.
Patrick Stewart,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think he was
Is he
knighted as
knighted
well.
too? I
Yeah.
guess so. It's you probably pay a quarter and you get some knighted.
Or like you're like an Oscar nominee. Maybe
Yeah.
that's part of it too.
I think it's funny if you're an actor, as though you've accomplished something.
Hey, don't knock it until you try it. Emotion on
Change
demand.
lives.
It's not
I'm sorry.
easy.
Changing
To all those
lives.
actors out there.
Yeah.
For someone
don't
who
pretend
loves
you're like
movies,
that.
that's a bold statement
is a
that
bold
Kurt just made there.
It was chose his
You know.
priorities in the right place.
I do think about that though. It's like the value you're giving as an actor is very roundabout value because it's not
man.
direct value. It's not like you're a plumber who's actually like fixing someone's leaky pipe or something like that. Like you're entertaining people, but you're
Yes.
also inspiring them. And I guess you're part of creating culture.
But you're inspiring them, but you didn't write the script or you're just pretending you're somebody.
Right. I always find
You're
that's
a
most
hypocrite.
impressive though when you
Hypocrite.
isn't that where the Greek term
Yeah,
came
it
from?
is, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you wear a mask
Yeah.
from the actors on the stage. A hypocrite. Are you a hypocrite, Jake?
Definitely. I feel like an actor a lot.
Is what we see what we get with you?
More and more all the time, but definitely not. I feel like it's hard not to put on a mask, put on a face,
Yeah.
even if it's the most minute, slightest amounts, right? Like I would say, I don't think of myself as a very fake person.
Yep.
Like I don't.
You're very authentic.
I feel like that, but
I mean, you wear the same clothes every day.
that's
so,
right.
like,
I went
That's
Jake
right.
today.
Yeah,
very
you did.
congruent.
There's freedom there. But I would say, what if I am honest with myself and I think about it, though a lot of my inauthenticity wouldn't be overt, there's very small things that if I am aware enough, I allow myself to do. And maybe some of it's helpful and not hurtful, you know?
Yeah.
If you're like extra hospitable when you don't feel like it, is that being inauthentic or is that just choosing kindness?
Right.
I think some of it's it's nuanced.
I guess
not
that's
as
like
black
the
and white.
danger of our authenticity culture, where it could be very much like, oh, I want my feelings to lead my actions.
Right.
That doesn't feel
It's
like
like, well, be a
me.
big boy and smile at somebody even if you don't feel like it, because that's a better thing to do.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, well,
that
that's
doesn't
maybe
really fit into
inauthentic.
Matthew 16 of denying yourself and picking up your cross.
Do you have something to say to that?
Do you think Meghan Markle's authentic?
Kurt's coming back. He can't let it go.
He actually desperately wants to
She
talk
was good
about
in
it.
Suits, though. I watched a couple seasons of Suits. She did a good job in that.
Yeah. I haven't seen it.
Suits was not as good as Mad Men, though. I watched some of that, and the acting in that was pretty
I think
prime.
that was good for you.
Mad Men. Have you seen Mad Men?
I haven't. No, I've watched a little bit, but like maybe one episode.
It's kind of like an Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
Where you got this guy Donald Draper, and his whole life is a lie. Speaking of hypocrites, he actually stole his identity from the guy who died in the foxhole next to him in the Korean War, and then he comes back and he completely abandons his poor family that he was part of during the Great Depression, so he can start a new life. This before social media and everything, and so he takes on this guy's identity, and he stole it, and the guy's wife is like okay with him taking the identity because he just like kind of explains himself. He's like, I just need a new start in life. And so Donald Draper isn't who he really is. He's a completely different guy who was raised on a farm in the 1930s during the Great Depression or whatever. And so he goes into New York and he goes to Madison Avenue and he becomes a salesman, and he does amazing in it. But his life is, he's like a family man. He's got a beautiful wife and 2 kids, but like he can't
doesn't he cheat on his wife?
He's super.
We're not for that.
What's the word? Infidelitis or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. He cheats on his wife a lot, basically. And so he has like all these sides to himself, these compartments, and you can tell like he doesn't even like realize it because his foundation starting point is a false identity to begin with.
Yeah, it's almost like the dam had already broken. So there's no point in saving any of it. What truth did you hold to if you already broke such a big lie?
Exactly. And so like the whole thing is like him trying to find himself, and finally towards the end he just like confesses. So it's actually really depressing because he confesses like at this like veterans hall type of like event where all these veterans come together and they honor them, and they all like towards the end are like, the veterans are all starting to like drink a little bit and like tell war stories. And so he like unleashes this secret that his, battle mate died next to him and he stole his identity. And all the veterans like reject him and like want to fight him. It's kind of this depressing moment because he's not given love in this moment of like extreme vulnerability. But by the end of it, he just kind of like completely leaves his sales job and like goes to California and like goes to like a meditation camp to try to like find himself, like goes to like this hippie camp.
Right. So now we know all about the Truman Show and Mad Men.
Well, it's kind of like Ecclesiastes. Yeah. It's like this vanity type of thing, but it's also a lot about identity, I think, in the sense of if you don't know who you are, all your actions will stem from that, and you'll live this really fractured and compartmentalized life where you're kind of doing one thing over here, one thing over there, and you're almost just an actor on a stage just trying to see, what do people want from me in this area? Or what do my pleasures want, No,
I talk about that a lot, and I say that's why I think the enemy's so good at creating the turmoil that we see in our culture now, because he's attacked identity. And he's made sin hand in hand with identity. And so when you can't separate the two, Jesus's words then appear to attack the individual, and it doesn't seem to come from a place of love because it's attacking somebody. But the reality is their lifestyle is not who they are. He created who they are. The lifestyle is a separate thing, but culturally they are completely united, which is so clever by the enemy. So evilly clever. And it's hard. So we have to remind people who their identity is in Jesus.
Right.
Amen. Along like those
Simba,
lines.
Remember who you are.
That's right.
His father says that. We all feel that. We all need our father saying that.
I do.
Remember.
I get chills.
Did you?
I need
You're lying. But that's kind.
I need to eat lunch.
Yep. And then you need to go to the jail.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And we're over time.
Yeah.
Do you want to close this out or should I?
You go ahead.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And don't forget to comment if you have any questions, or if you just want to say something nice to us, give us a compliment, give Kurt a compliment, smash the like button, hit subscribe, leave a review. And of course, if you see us on Sunday, we'd love to say hi.
Come on.
We'll see you around.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.